Hello everybody, and welcome back for this final part of the tutorial. This is an opportunity for you to join a project right away. So if you've been excited by what Seek and iNaturalist can do and you're looking for a way to get involved, to get outside, and to contribute some valuable data to a project, we got one for you. You can join the Invasive Strike Force team. This is a challenge called the EcoQuest Challenge that we run through the Invasive Strike Force through the Lower Hudson Prism that you can get involved with. It helps us track the distribution of invasives and native species oftentimes in the Lower Hudson Valley and in northern New Jersey. It's a way of getting involved all year long. We run this program through the winter, spring, summer, fall, all year long. And basically every month we put out a different call for an invasive or native species to track by using Seek and iNaturalist to help you with identification. You can pin the location of the species that you saw and just be on the lookout for whatever species that we are highlighting in that particular month. The choice of that species usually follows a phenology pathway. So for example, if there is a plant that we are interested in tracking that is flowering in a particular month, we may highlight that for the month. And we communicate with our volunteers as to what species we're highlighting as part of that EcoQuest challenge and using Seek and iNaturalist to track. And we have lots of active volunteers that contribute. And this is a great way to get involved to help us track our local biodiversity and protect our native species and to look at the distribution of the invasives that may be infringing upon their habitat. So I just wanted to point out before we go much farther in this and you join, just what an invasive species is. In our previous part of the tutorial, we've talked about what native and introduced is and what non-native might be. But to be truly considered an invasive species, it actually takes it one step further. So first of all, it has to be to be considered an invasive alien species. It has to be outside of its native range, so a plant or animal or some other kind of organism that's outside its native range. So that's a non-native species, something that came from another region and has come into our local ecosystem. And it has to be introduced by humans. So again, just a non-native species, a human introduction, but to be considered truly invasive and not just non-native, it has to have some negative impacts. Typically, we think about negative impacts in terms of biodiversity or ecosystem services, but it could be something that negatively impacts human well-being, whether that be health or economy, or some other way kind of interferes with the functioning of both ecosystem services or human health or harm to human health. More or less, it is a species that is aggressive and threatens local biodiversity. For us at Lower Hudson Prism, we are really concerned about ecosystem services and protecting our native habitats. And so we are looking at species that are introduced that are impacting and threaten our local biodiversity in some way. In terms of invasive species concerns, they certainly can crowd out and outcompete native species. In fact, the garlic mustard that we have been tracking and I've given you examples of, a lot of the invasives like garlic mustard started out as cultivated species or something that that humans were introducing on purpose, maybe to grow, or thought that there could be some sort of economy or that could be built around it. So some of them are introduced on purpose, but other times, these are introduced accidentally. Say that they are hitchhikers in ballast of ships, something like zebra or quagga mussels you might have heard about in the news that came over in inter-ocean ships and in trade and things. So just introduced by accident, hitchhiking along for the ride, whether it's in cargo holds or whatever. But for one reason or another, they are here. They have established and become nuisances and sort of starting to push out local species in some way and outcompete them. They are one of the largest threats to biodiversity and rare species in the US and worldwide. In fact, they are considered to be the second biggest driver of species extinction in the world right now after habitat loss and habitat degradation. And in fact, even thinking about habitat degradation, invasive species, you think about things like invasive vines just totally infringing upon native ecosystems and degrading the habitat so that not a lot of diverse amount of species can inhabit that area anymore. And you think about things like islands in which it's more secluded. Invasive species get into those areas, and they are the primary driver of extinction and decreases in local biodiversity in those areas. So something to definitely be mindful of, both worldwide, but also impacting our local ecosystems as well. In terms of how invasive plants in particular, and that's oftentimes what our eco-quests are focused on, are native and invasive plants. As to how invasive plants cause environmental harm, well, they take up space. I mean, they're a living organism. They have come in and and are good at competing in some way, whether it's nutrient uptake or stealing sunlight, or just taking up space and other resources that native species need, crowding them out. So if you take a look at this picture here, this is an invasive that has taken over a lot of the forest floors in our region in the Lower Hudson Prism. This Japanese stiltgrass in one of our local parks that has just blanketed the forest floor. I mean, in terms of uptake of water and nutrients from the soil, sunlight, there's not much that can grow that beneath a dense bed like this. Kudzu is another one that has moved up from the south and is starting to infringe upon our native habitats here. This is an invasive vine that is a crawling, sprawling vine, again, stealing nutrients, sunlight from native plants. This is another example of just invasive vines when they take over, just completely smothering the ecosystem. And yes, they even eating or overtaking buses in some ways. But just you can look, this is a complete monoculture. There's not much that can grow beneath this, and certainly limiting the amount of biodiversity that can grow in these regions. As to why native species are so important, it's one thing to be like, well, invasives are here. What can we really do about it? Maybe we should just adjust to them being here. Well, there's a lot of reason to actually protect our native plants. Number one, native plants support a more diverse wildlife. I mean, most of our native species of insects, including butterflies, are adapted to eating native plants. The majority of plant-eating insects and pollinators are specialized to 3 or fewer species of plants. Monarch butterflies, which are really quite an ambassador species and something that we all have loved and appreciated the beauty and these mass migrations that they make. These monarch butterfly caterpillars only are adapted to eat milkweed. And just to go further with this example, we have an invasive plant that has moved into our area called swallowwort that is related to milkweeds, but monarchs get tricked into thinking that they can lay their eggs and feed off of this. But in fact, the caterpillars cannot survive on these lookalikes to milkweed, these swallowwort plants. And so not only are they stealing nutrients, but they become almost like an egg dumping ground for these monarchs and these plants cannot sustain them. So not only is this swallowwort out competing and with milkweed that the monarchs rely upon, but they mimic them biologically, even though they're not viable as a food source for the caterpillar. So just another reason and things to think about as to how invasive plants can infringe upon our native habitats and influence our native plant. And so not only with the loss of these native plants, you get what is called a cascading effect on the food web. So you lose your native plants with the invasive species or invasive plants that are out competing them. That then influences the insects that can feed on them. And you think about and look at a global index of invertebrate abundance, over time. And since the 1970s, we've seen a dramatic drop in insect diversity and abundance throughout the world. And certainly invasive species are infringing upon our native pollinators, which is making it even harder on these insect populations that we've seen decline by almost 75% over the last 3 decades. And just remember that insects serve as food. Not only are they important pollinators, but they serve as food for many other animals, including birds that we want to protect and support and enjoy seeing on our hikes and nature walks. So, this is what I mean by cascading effects on the food web. It's not just about the plants, but it's about that plants being a food source for others as you go up in trophic level. In terms of other impacts of invasive species, not only do they impact ecological services, but we are looking at big losses economically throughout the forestry industry, the agricultural industry, tourism, fisheries, and some estimates can be as high as 120 to 137 billion dollars a year in damage and pest control in the United States alone. Early detection of invasive species and invasive plants and insects in particular is so critical. Once an invasive species has established, it gets very hard to control and eradicate. But if we have citizen science volunteers like you guys getting out there and reporting where these invasive species are early on, management options are still an option, and we can still do something about it, whether eradication is the mission or just control. And in fact, like if you look at economic costs across, not only in the United States, I mean, this is a big economic drain across the world. Greater than 20 billion in Europe per year, over 14 billion a year in Australia, and look at the United States. I mean, this is our biggest threat to biodiversity in the United States are invasive species. This is not something this is not a minor thing. This is a huge drain in our economy as well, in addition to environmental harm. So, but there are things you can do. I want you to leave thinking that yes, I mean, invasive species can cause environmental and economic harm, but there are things that you can do to minimize human disturbance and the spread of invasive species. You go out on a hike, be on the lookout for boot brushes. Seeds and things can cling to your clothing. Make sure as soon as you're done with hiking and before you go to another park, make sure to run it through the laundry. Use boot brush stations if you come across them at trailheads. You can get involved with community removal projects. And, there's plenty of local distributors that, to plant native species in your gardens. You can make your home garden and your property look beautiful by planting native species. So ask questions at landscaping places and at your local nurseries to ask about, what native plants can I purchase as opposed to buying something from another region that might get spread. So just remember, you take a plant that comes from another region, you put it in your front yard, and you think, oh well, it's only in my front yard. But you've got pollinators visiting it. You might have birds eating the berries that then go and spread those seeds out into our forest ecosystems and out in natural areas, and all of a sudden, the plant that's now in your front yard that is non-native is now distributing itself in more natural areas in our forests. So, to spread the word about this is I guess the catchphrase is to spread the word on invasives, not the species themselves. And certainly one of the ways that you can get involved to become detectives, be those early detectors out there. Join our Seek and iNaturalist survey team. That's one great way to participate and do something to protect our local ecosystems and to get involved. So in terms of our program, remember, it's through the Lower Hudson Prism. It's called the Invasive Strike Force, and we have plenty of citizen science programs. The one that I am talking about today is called the EcoQuest Challenge, where we put out monthly calls. It's almost like scavenger hunt style, as I talked about earlier. We put out a call to search for a native and an invasive species, typically in that month, that show key ID features like flowers blooming, berries appearing, and you use these apps that you've learned about today, both Seek and iNaturalist, for helping with the IDs. It's really easy and fun to participate. You can do it on your own time. We put out these calls. You just, you can sign up for our newsletter and learn about what species that we're looking for in any particular month. You can log on to our website to learn about it. There's also more formal scientific surveyor options are available as well. And you can learn about those opportunities by visiting our website at lhprism.org or by contacting us at invasives@nynjtc.org. So feel free to email us and we can tell you all about those programs. We get a lot of students that want to participate in this that are either in high school or college or at university that can earn community service hours. Master gardeners or make up a lot of our volunteers, and they love it. It's a great way to learn about wildflowers and things that you're seeing out on your hikes. So even the casual hiker, you want to get involved and give back. This is an awesome way of giving back. So, as to why it's important to be a naturalist right now, and to kind of go back to the initial part of the tutorial, because asking questions and exploring is critical to protecting the environment. And there's so much to learn and so much we can be a part of out there. That it's an awesome time to become a naturalist. It's just exciting. Be that inquisitive mind, reinvigorate that sense of wonder about the natural world, and give back. Contribute valuable data that we can use to protect our local ecosystems and our parks that we love to explore. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'll take you to our EcoQuest website to show you a little bit of that. I'm going to share my screen here for you in a second. So here you go. So one way to search for us is to look at or just go to Google and search for Lower Hudson Prism EcoQuest Challenge 2020. That'll take you to our page that you can click on. And you can see, it uses Seek and iNaturalist. It takes you through what the challenges are, a little introduction here. And, for example, this training session is being recorded in March. So our current challenge is on lesser celandine. So if you go to this website and this EcoQuest Challenge website, you can register by clicking on this link here for our March challenge in 2020. So if you're viewing this in April or a later month, you can go to this website and you'll see what the current challenge is. And it focuses on lesser celandine, very similar to actually garlic mustard, which we talked a lot about today during this training session. It's a low-lying herbaceous plants that will very soon, if not already in March, is maybe flowering yellow. And we give you information on whatever species it is, how to find it, some key ID features, like for example, the dense leaves of lesser celandine, kidney shaped, etc. And it tells you all about it and ways to sign up, and using Seek to help you out with the ID and how to post to iNaturalist and how to post to the project. So I hope this inspires you to go out and do something. To contribute data to a citizen science project. It's a way of getting immediately involved, and at the very least that you've learned something and want to go out and explore on your own. And I've just shown you a couple of examples of things that you could be looking for on Seek and through iNaturalist, but there's so much to explore and so much to learn. So thank you for your time and attention, and hope this inspires you to go out and explore. Thank you very much.